We'll do a review in Likkutei Sichos and Chelek Chof Aleph. This is volume 21, the second Sicha for the portion of Shemos. The Rebbe based himself on the pasuk that when the Eibishter Hashem was asking Moshe that he should go and take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, and Eibishter tells him that v'nosatis chein ha'om hazeh b'nimeinim Mitzrayim, that I will give the grace of this people in the eyes of the Egyptians. They'll borrow them. And he brings down the Medrash, and we find this in the Gemara, this whole idea that uh, the Eibishter said that Avraham Avinu, who was promised that the Yidden will go out with a great fortune, shouldn't complain and say to Hashem that the Yidden worked hard and enslaved them, and that he fulfilled, but he didn't fulfill the promise to bring with that they'll go out with a big fortune. And that's why the Eibishter is telling them that they will go out a big fortune. So, but the Rebbe is going to discuss why was this important to tell Moshe Rabbeinu right in the beginning, and also doesn't Hashem have to fulfill his promise regardless? So Avram is going to complain. The Rebbe is going to say that there's two ways of looking about the fact that the Yidden took from the Egyptian. As the Gemara explains that this was actually pay for all the work that they did there. But there's two ways of looking at it. Is it mainly a punishment for the Egyptians to pay, so they should be punished for working the Yidden, but inevitably we give it to the Yidden? Or it's mainly the Yidden worked, so they need to get paid. So who are we going to take it from? From the Egyptians. So what difference does it make? Which way? It depends how it's given. If the pay is given in a way which you can tell that it's paid. If it's mainly to punish them, it doesn't matter. If during the Makkah's Choshech say the Yidden would get all the uh, fortune of the Egyptians, they would still be punished. They took away what they had and it went to the Yidden. But if the idea is that it should be in a pay, it has to be that they should give it and they should collect it from them. And that's the Rebbe is going to add in the Medrash and in the Gemara, as we'll see. But let's go step by step. Aleph. From Posik v'nosati eschein ha'om hazeh be'enei Mitzrayim v'goymer. The Posik says that the Eibishter says to Moshe, I will give the grace of this people in the eyes of the Egyptian, and they will borrow them all the various silver and gold and there, all the different vessels. So, was der Eibishter hat gesagt, Moshe Rabbeinu beim Ansagen im wegen Yetzias Mitzrayim, that Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu when he told him about the exodus of Egypt, he tells him that Hashem will give the grace of the people in the eyes of Egypt. Steht in Medrash. So the Medrash says on this pasuk, "V'nosati eschein ha'om," I will give the grace of this people. The Egyptians will give them. Mashamarti la'Avraham v'acharei chen yetzu b'rechush godel. This that I have told Avraham that after the time that they will serve the nation, they will end up going out with the great fortune. Anin osid lasis eschem lechein be'enem Mitzrayim. I am future. I'm going to make you gracefully in the eyes of the Egyptian, kadesha yash ilum, so that they should loan you, v'yelchu meleim, and that so the Yidden will go full, with meaning the rechush godel, they should not go empty-handed, but go full with all the assets. And the reason is b'chdei shelo yehei pischim peh l'Avram Avinu loymar, so that there should not be an opening to Avram Avinu's mouth to say, to complain, loymar, Vavodim v'inu oisoyom kiyam b'hem. The part that they will enslave them, they will afflict them, he fulfilled. So the Yidden ended up in Mitzrayim. The Eibishter told him, "Vavodim v'inu oisom." The Eibishter fulfilled that. So Avram will say, "You fulfilled the part that you said they will work them and they will afflict them, but but you did not fulfill the other part that later on, after that, they will go out with a great fortune." So, in order for Avram not to be able to have this argument, the Eibishter says that I will give the grace of this people, so they will give them, so that they will go out with all this fortune, so that Avram Avinu should not have any complaints. But so, uh, what is Rashi? What is the Medrash coming to tell us over here? So one wonders, why does Hashem start off when he's first telling Moshe Rabbeinu that he should go and take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim? He hasn't even told him, he didn't accept it yet, and right away he tells him about this great fortune. So the Medrash explains this is an important part, because how could the Yidden go out of Mitzrayim? It has to be through this great fortune. This is part of the exodus of Mitzrayim. That's important right in the beginning. But the second part of the Medrash is, Rebbe asks, why is that? Why is that important for the Medrash? Why is it important that Hashem has to fulfill His promise? Because Abraham will complain. Hashem has to fulfill His promise because He said so. Why does the Medrash bring down the second part, that the Eibishter has to give and take them out b'rechush gadol because Abraham shouldn't complain? We explain. The bavornish von hascholas divrei hamedrash. The beginning of the words of the Medrash is trying to caution us, explain to us, which when he says, the Medrash says, "Mashavrom marti lavrom v'achri chen yetzu b'rechush gadol." This that I said to Avram, they will go out with a great big fortune, is moving bepashtus. We understand what the Medrash is trying to tell us here. Because the question arises when we read this in the pasuk that the Eibishter is saying to Moshe, that Hashem says, "I'll give them the grace, and they will give them the loan them the dishes, the vessels." So he's moving. The pashtus are simply understood. Yois as a stelz of the Shiloh, because the question arises immediately. How come the Eibishter, God, immediately? Before even Moshe generally accepted this mission of going to Padre and taking the Nar of Mitzrayim, Upshita Farnar is gained from Midian. This is, and certainly he didn't even go out of Midian yet. So why is the Eibishter immediately at this point, before Moshe accepted the mission and the Shlichus, and before he's even left Mitzrayim, in Midian, he's still in Midian. Reden dik mit Moshe wegen Yitzias Mitzrayim, and while he was talking to Moshe Yitzias Mitzrayim, him gesagt, why is Hashem telling him about us? V'nosati es chenom v'goymer. I will give the. Why is he telling him now? Entfer der Medrash. So the Medrash is therefore is answering this. As the mitver gemeint an iker tnai, that this, with this Yetzu b'rechush gadol, is not something, a side point. That is a main condition, vos meglich the yitzia, which allows for the exodus. The yishalach eschem, that the yishalach send you away. We need to have this part in order for him to send you away. If before Hashem sends you, you will make sure to get that rechush gadol. V'nosati goyme v'shol isha mishchenta. That I will give the grace, and every and every woman will borrow from her neighbor those kesem, that's an important part. Then Hashem can make the geula. Kiyum haftocha von Eberstun. That is the fulfillment of the promise of Hashem. Gleich beim Onzogen. Immediately, when Hashem has told about Wegen Golus Ugulus Mitzrayim Ivris ben Absorim. When Hashem originally told about the exile and the redemption of Mitzrayim, Ivris ben Absorim, in the covenant between the pieces to Avram Avinu, Hashem said, they will go out with a great fortune. So before we can let him out, we have to make sure that this happens. So that's why the Eibishter is telling him. Medarf ober verstehen, however, we have to understand, was meint der Medrash mit dem, was is mamshech? What does the Medrash mean when he continues, Bichdei shelo yeh pischem pel Avram Avinu chulu, so that Avram Avinu should not have an opening of a mouth, a complaint. Lamain of Kemina Avram's pischem pel, what difference does it make, Avram's complaints? Der Eibishter darf doch mekayim sein auf der Chosei. Hashem needs to fulfill his promise. So Hashem is telling them that make sure to get the klei chesed v'klei zov they should borrow, so that there should be Yitzias Mitzrayim, because he told them Yetzu b'rechush godel. But why does the Medrash have to say that Avram shouldn't have a complaint, a pischim peh, why he's not fulfilling? Abishter needs to fulfill the promise because Hashem needs to fulfill the promise. The Rebbe brings down in Ois Beis, there's another place where we find the same idea that the Abishter promised and he has to fulfill it to Avram. And over there we understand. In the Gemara we understand why we need to come to that promise. The Gemara bases itself later on in Parshas Boi, when Moshe Rabbeinu is telling to the Yidden, when Hashem is saying to Moshe, Daber no b'oznei ha'om, ask the people, please. Over there we understand why the Yidden were saying, we want out of Mitzrayim, and we don't care about the Rechush Gadol. And the Eibishter says, Daber no, I insist, please, because the Eibishter says, if I just let you out of Mitzrayim like you're asking, then Avram could have a pischem peh. He'll complain. So I can't listen to your request. I can't grant your request, and I need you to daber no yishallah, please ask. So that's in the Gemara. But here in the Medrash, here we're talking in the parsha when the Eibishter is telling to Moshe Rabbeinu when he's still in Midian. Over there, we're not talking about asking the Yidden. We're talking about the Eibishter is saying that this is what's going to take place. Why do we have to bring in Avraham Avinu into the picture over here? The Eibishter tells them that they should, that he's telling Moshe Rabbeinu that he has to bring them the Greek fortune because that's what he promised them. Lamainav community to talk about Avraham Avinu here. Base. This is what the Rebbe is going to explain. The same idea as those was in haben gedarft shoyl sein von dem Mitzrim klechese v'goymer, idea that it needed to borrow the klechese is kidei Avram zol nit haben de taine, in order that Avram should not have the argument v'avodim kiyum, that he fulfilled, they should serve them. But then they should go out with a great fortune he did not fulfill. So this idea that the Medrash brings down here, we find this in the Gemara Brachas, but there we don't have the same problem like we had Bas the Medrash. But dort is move on the Neutigkeit zu bewohnen the Taine von Avram. Over there we know the necessity that we need to specifically forewarn the argument of Avram, and not because Hashem promised himself. Because in that context over there, the Yidden were ready to give up the Rechush Gadol just to get out of Mitzrayim as early as possible. The Gemara stellt sich auf dem Posik in Parshas Boy. See, we're here in the Parshas Shemos, and the Gemara is talking about the Posik in Parshas Boy. Daber no beoznei ha'om ve'yishalu goymer. Speak to the people of Shabbat. V'cheret wegen dem Ansog von Obersten zu Moshe. Over there, that Pasuk is talking about Hashem is instructing Moshe as Eden sollen scheel sein von dem Mitzri im Rechush. That the Yidden should, the Eberst is telling Moshe, make sure that they should take the assets, they should take along the fortune from Mitzrayim. Unis Masbir. The Gemara explains, Amrid mei Rabbi Yanai. So it says no, daber no, please. So the way Rabbi Yanai, in the yeshiva Rabbi Yanai, they said, Ein no el loshem bakosha. No is a language of a begging, a request. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, Hashem says to Moshe, bevakosha mimcha. I ask, I beg of you, leich v'amor lahem liYisrael. Go and say to the Yidden, bevakosha mikem. I ask of you, tell them, I asking you to tell the Yidden that Hashem is asking them. Shalom Mitzrayim klei chesed v'klei zohav. Borrow from the Egyptians silver and golden vessels. Shlo yomer esed tzaddik. So that tzaddik who Avram, Pirush Rashi says Avram, v'avodim v'ino esim kiyam b'hem, that he fulfilled the avodim v'ino esim, he fulfilled by them. V'ach kech yetzu b'rechush godel, lo kiyam b'hem, he did not fulfill by them. So, in the Gemara's context, which we're explaining why is Hashem begging the Yidden for doing this? To say the Gemara Bavorin the Shaila, which means that the Gemara answers the question for was der Eberster hat gedarf beten the Yidden. Why did he have to beg the Yidden? Daber no, please. Ein no loshon bakoshen, no is bakoshen. Sie sollen scheel sein die Kliches of Chlezof and the Mitzrim, that they should borrow the silver and golden vessel from the Mitzrim. Hagam as in Zeir Demel Dikem Matzev haben sie gar nicht getracht wegen dem Klau. In their condition, they were there, they weren't thinking about the gold and silver vessels. But the Gemara Firto says the Gemara concludes over there that their stating was Amru loy valavayishen etzivatzmeinu. So they said to Moshe, we hopefully that we can just leave ourselves, forget about the silver and the gold. So, since in that condition the Yidden didn't think about silver and gold, they just wanted to get out, is the Gemara Mevad. The Gemara explains as Afalpi, that even though as Yidden beten mevater seine von der Chush Godel, that the Yidden are requesting, they are ready to forego on this great fortune. Can aber der Eberster nicht memale sein bakoshosom, the Eberster cannot fulfill their request, so that tzaddik should not say that the Eibishter didn't fulfill his promise, because the Yidden themselves are asking, we want to go out, we don't want no Ruchush God, we're not worried about the Kesef. The Eibishter says no. So why does the Eibishter say no? Because lo yomer esed tzaddik. Aber do im Medrash, so that's in the Gemara, do im Medrash, wo es redt sich nicht wegen dem Onzog zu Yidden. But now Medrash over here, we're not talking about telling the Yidden to sheel sein von the Mitzrim to borrow for the Egyptians. Nor wegen them was der Eberster veton zu memalazam techoso. We're just talking about what Hashem is going to do to fulfill this promise that He said. So Hashem is saying to them that they will give the Chenaam and they will take v'nosati as Chenaam. It was that an onkumen, so why do we need to come on the Meder saying, Asi is B'Gdeish is Peschem Pel Avrom, Shalo Yehi Peschem Pel Avrom should be an opening of mouth. Avrom shouldn't have a complaint. So Mele in the Gemara, where Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Yidden, begging them, Hashem says beg them, because the Yidden themselves saying, no, we're ready to go out, forget about the silver and the gold. The vessels. So the Eibishter says, no, I promised Avram I must do this. So I can't accept your prayer. You're asking to go out without it. I have to make sure. So we understand why why the Gemara has to say that. But in this pasuk, where Hashem is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, what that he's gonna give the grace so that they will give the Rechush Gadol. So that's what Hashem needs to do because He promised. What does it have to do with Avraham Avinu? In Ois Gimel, the Rebbe will continue to ask several questions on the statement that quoted in the above sayings. Euch Gimel, euch seinen Faran kamo di Yukim in dem Maimerazal Hanau. There are also several questions in the above mentioned saying of our sages of blessed memory. Umehem, the Rebbe will ask a few of these questions. Aleph, number one. Was is der Tam HaHadgosha in dem Loshen Kiyem Bohem or Loikiyem Bohem? The word Bohem, that whether Hashem fulfilled in them the promise to be enslaved, He did not fulfill the promise of making them into Berchush Godel, that should go out of Berchush Godel. Why emphasize Bohem, fulfilled in them or didn't fill in them? L'chayre, it would seem, Hagedarf Stein, it should have stated, without the Bohem, Va'avodum ve'inu oisom kiyem, that they work and afflict them, He fulfilled. Not Bohem, Kiyem, He fulfilled. And later on, they go out with a great force. Loikim, He did not fulfill, not Loikim Bohem in them. What's the point of the Bohem? Also, why connect? Because this He did fulfill. How come He didn't fulfill? The argument should be, why is He not fulfilling the promise? Why is it related to the beginning, saying this He did do, He did fulfill the servitude, the Inu Esom? He should have just said that Avram Avinu shouldn't say He didn't fulfill the promise of Achrichein base. For was is the tiny and oifen? Why is the argument in such a way? As der Kiyum von der Yetzur Rechush Godel. Why are we asking Hashem to fulfill this that He said they will go to Rechush Godel? Werd gefordert. It's being demanded. Was is given der Kiyum because there was the fulfillment from Vavodum Ve'inu Oisom, that they will serve them and they will afflict them, the Egyptians. And because Hashem fulfilled that, He should also fulfill that Avram Taina is going to be, should also fulfill the promise that they'll go out with a great fortune. The Lecheide is the Tainas, the Avtoche V'achrei Chen Yetzu B'Rechush Godel. This argument, it would seem that the Hashem promised they should go out with a great fortune. Like Kiyum Behem, He did not fulfill. That's the main, the Zeu Iker HaTarumis. That's the main complaint. It's not so much the complaint. The part that He did fulfill, the other part, that's not part of the complaint. So why does the Medrash emphasize and bring down first that, oh, He fulfilled that part, why isn't He fulfilling this part? First, the Rebbe asked, why does it essay Bohem? And second, why does He Bechlal bring in the first part, that He did fulfill the promise that they will serve them? And Gimel, the Rebbe says also the comparing the languages between the Gemara and the Medrash. Gimel, was is der Tam von dem Shina HaLeshonos zwischen Medrash and Gemara? What's the reason of the change of languages between the Medrash and the Gemara? In Medrash state, the difference is about Medrash says Shelo Yipischein Peh L'Avrom Avinu. So over here the language is Pischein Peh, and it says who Avrom Avinu. But in the Gemara, it's not Pischein Peh. But there it says Shelo Yoimar. It shouldn't say, not Pischem Peh. And it doesn't mention Avraham Avinu, it says Oisei Tzadik. And the Rebbe said that in the Medrash, he didn't really have to say Avram Avinu because in the Medrash is mentioned Avram Avinu, and yet it says Avram Avinu, and the Gemara doesn't say Avram Avinu. It just says Shloyema. Rashi teaches that it means Avram. Ubefrat, as the Medrash is schon früher der Mond geworden, der Nomen Avraham. In the Medrash, the name Avram has already been mentioned. The Pasuk said, Masha Marti, I mean, the Medrash says, Masha Marti Avram. So we're talking what I said to Avram. It says already Avram. The Mela seinen Diverter, so when the Medrash says, Shloyeh Pischem Pel Avram Avinu, they're extra. They seem like to be extra. Masha Enkin, in Gemara wird Avram Klal Niedermont. Over there, he's not mentioned Avraham. Und doch nutzt the Gemara doesn't say Shloyemer Avraham, but the Toyer Oisei Tzadik, that Tzadik, und nicht Avraham Avinu. So what is the difference? Is the Rebbe will explain the difference, what the Medrash is coming to tell us, and what the Gemara is adding on top of the Medrash, as the Rebbe will explain later on. Dalit. So the Rebbe wants to explain this whole idea that Hashem made a promise, and we're saying to Hashem, you have to keep the promise because somebody shouldn't complain. Avram shouldn't complain. Wow. Hashem needs to fulfill the promise because he promised, not because somebody will complain. But what it means is that the promise can be fulfilled in various different formats. And so the Eibusher is going to have to it does his promise anyways. But the tzaddik will complain about specifically how the Eibusher is fulfilling his promise. And that the Rebbe will explain because there's two possibilities. And what the Avraham Avinu, what the tzaddik complains is that it needs to be in one of those two ways, specifically not in a way that it wouldn't be recognized. And it has to do with Avraham Avinu, as the Rebbe will explain. That we das verstehen behagdim, will understand this ois dalet, will understand this by first introducing. Der Eibusher darf mekayim sein der Haftoche, machmas ha-Haftoche atzma. Hashem needs to fulfill the promise just because of the promise itself, because he promised. Weil hat zugesagt, because he promised. Warum sie is doch, we know, as quoting the verse, Loi ish kelvi chazev. God is not a man that will say non-truth. Omar v'lo yaseh. Will he say and not do? V'diber v'lo yikimena, and speak and not fulfill? Or the other pasuk says, Lo yachalel berisi, I will not desecrate my covenant. Umoitzas v'osei lo yashane, and what comes out of my lips I won't change. So the Eibusher does because he says so. There's not a problem. Unit belois zu vermeiden the taine von Abraham, not just fulfilling in order to prevent Abraham from having a complaint. Hashem does it because Hashem promises, hey, he'll do it. So why are we saying that Hashem is because of Avraham? That means like this. Is the fun gufa hechrich zu sagen. So from this we have to say, as euch on dem v'nosati eschein goimer, that even without Hashem saying to Moshe, I will give thee grace, hat der Eibusher gekonnt mekayim sein Haftoche. Hashem was able to fulfill his promise as Eden sollen bakumen aruchush godel, that the Yidden should receive this great fortune. We didn't, in order for Hashem to fulfill this problem, to fulfill his promise, they could still do rechush godel without nosatis chein omazeh. Von deswegen, but if the Eibusher fulfilled this promise in another way, yet still, there may still be place for the argument and the opening of the mouth, the complaint from Avraham Avinu. We can still argue. So basically, v'nosati eschein is to take away the complaint of Avram Avinu. But Hashem could fulfill the promise in other ways. Und das is the Medrash Mechadish. And this is what the Medrash comes up novelty is, that davke durch dem, was der heißt, Havtoche, was wird ausgeführt in dem Eufen. That it's specifically that the promise is being fulfilled in this way von Venosati Eschein Ha'om Hazeh Be'enim Mitzrayim V'gomer, that I will give the grace of this people in the eyes of the Egyptian V'gomer. Vert Bavorun Shelo Yepeschen Pel Avram Avinu. That's the way that we take care of the opening of the mouth, the complaint of Avram Avinu, that would be a complaint, is because Hashem is saying, that's what the Medrash is coming to tell us. Yes, Hashem could fulfill his promise, but through V'nosati as Cheno Mazeh, says the Medrash, then Avram Avinu is not going to have any opening of any complaints, because Hashem will do it in a way Nosati as Cheno Mazeh. And then the Gemara adds, "Un in dem chidush is the Gemara meisif nochmer." And this novelty that the Medrash says that the Eibishter will give them the rechush godel through v'nosati chein, says the Gemara. Addition to that, as the inyan v'nosati chein ha'omazeh beinem Mitzrayim, this idea of giving the grace of the people in the eyes of Egypt, kidei sheyashilum just so that they shall loan them and they shall go full, is noch euch nicht in ganzen maspik. That also isn't entirely sufficient. As so gedarf sein in an Eifon, it needed to be in such a way. Von daber no, Hashem has to beg them, no, please, ba'oznei ha'om v'yishalu goimer. So, meaning that the Yidden should do the borrowing. In the pasuk over here, it says the Chein Ha'am, that they will give them on their own. That's one way to stop the argument that Avram may have. So Hashem can fulfill the promise in a different way totally. Hashem fulfills the promise, the Medrash says, in a way, Vayishalu. The Gemara adds, in a way of Nosati Eschein Mazeh, the Gemara adds that it has to be in a way, Hashem says, V'yishalu, that they should be during the borrowing. Eden sollen beten dos by the Mitzrim, to ask by the Egyptian, was der mit wird in ganzen nicht sein kemokim zu Tainus Avram. That way, when the Yidden will borrow it, they will ask for it. It's not just that the Egyptians will on their own agree to give, but that they will ask from them, the Yidden will ask from them, then there would be no mistake and no place for the argument of Avram. So the Rebbe explains that generally the idea that the Rebbe is going to continue to explain is that the Eibishter can fulfill his promise in different ways. Say by Makas Choshech, the Eibishter could have given the Yidden all their fortune of the Mitzri, but that wouldn't be sufficient to answer Avram. Avram's Pischem Peh is answered basically when the Eibishter says, I will give the grace of the people and they will lend them, or they will give the Yidden. And yet the Gemara says that's also not entirely enough. It has to come through the Yidden asking. And the Rebbe is going to explain that the idea of the Medrash is that Avram Avinu says, his argument is, the Rebbe explained, that the Yidden should not just get the fortune because the Mitzrim need to be punished, and therefore we're giving it to the Yidden. Somebody has to get it, but the Eibishter, Avram Avinu's time is that the Yidden should get it in a way as a pay for all the work. Okay, where we're going to get it from? We're going to get it from the Egyptian, but the main part of it is to actually give it to the Indian in a way. So first, we have the Medrash that says that the Egyptians are giving it from their own, but that's not enough. It comes through a demand of the Indian that gives it full pay, as the Rebbe will explain. Hey, the Bir Bazeh. The Gemara that zählt im Masechta Sanhedrin, the Gemara relates in the tractate Sanhedrin as Bisman Alexandrus Moigdon, in the time of Alexander Moigdon, seinen Bnei Mitzrayim gekommen zu ihm mit Ateine. The Egyptians, the descendants of the Egyptians, came to an argument. As Jeden sollen sie zurückgegeben, die Kesef Zohov, the Jeden should return to them the silver and the gold, was sie haben was sie zugenommen, that they took away from them. Hat say Kivia ben Pesisa geantwortet. So there was this person, Kivia ben Pesisa, he responded, he answered, you should give us, you want your pay back, the things that we borrowed back, you have to give us the pay for work of 600,000. That you enslaved in Egypt. So if you think that we owe you, you actually owe the Yidden Gviyah Psissa says for all the labor that they enslaved them for all those years. So the Meforshim explain, as the Rechush Godel was Yidden haben gekrogen von the Mitzrayim, from the Mitzrim, this great fortune that the Yidden received from the Egyptians, hat sie gekumt als gezahlt. They deserved it as pay, Tashlum. That was payment for Mitzrayim for their work in Egypt. So now this pay is two things. One, Egyptians need to lose it, and two, the Yidden need to get paid. Das is given. Sai an the Mitzrim. Because this was also a punishment for the Mitzrim, as the Rebbe will say later on, Kiddle Kamon. And also as a payment for employment. They work for them. It's a pay. Fardin, that worked them. Can sein in them zwei fanim, so you can be two possible ways. Welcher von the zwei is given the Iker? Which of the two was the main? Was it the punishment of the Egyptian was the main? Or was the pay for the Yidden the main? Aleph. Number one, it could be, Ados was the Mitzrim hom gedafta weggeben the Yidden zeire rechush. The fact that the Egyptian needed to give away to the Yidden their belongings is given beikir als einish for the Mitzrim. It was mainly a punishment for the Egyptian. Mefarish sein dem Posik by Bris Ben Abesorim. And then we explain the Posik that the Eibishter said to Avram by the covenant amongst the pieces. The Eibishter says, also that nation that they will serve, I will judge. And then they will go out with a great fortune, is part of the punishment of Don Anoichi of that nation. As the Yetzu Berechush Godel, that it says they will go out with a great fortune, is a chelik and a hemshech. It's a part and it's a continuation from them as a goy Don Anoichi. That this nation I will judge. That is a continuation of that. Doseist, which means the Iker mainly is the der Oynesh von v'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. Mainly, this is a punishment that you should clean out Egypt. Nor farvos kommt es on to the Davke. But how come that cleaning out of Egypt, why does it come to the Yidden? Bald as Eden haben gearbeitet by the Mitzrim, since the Jews worked by the Egyptian, is der Einisch von den Mitzrim gewinn ausgestellt azoi. So therefore it was set up, the punishment of the Egyptian was set up as the Eden sollen bakumen zeir rechush als charavoida, that the Eden should get their fortune as pay for their work. So mainly on the first way of thinking, and the first idea is that really this is all a punishment for the Egyptian. That's the main thing. That's part rechush of Yetzik rechush gadol. They'll take away, but since the Yidden work there, we're going to give it to the Yidden because as reward. But the main goal is the punishment of the Egyptians. But the other way is no. The main thing is to pay the Yidden, but it's just that they got to take it from somewhere, so they take it from the Egyptians. Based as the rechush gadol is melechatchila nikva gavoren al schar fardem v'avodim v'inoisim. This great fortune to begin with was set up as pay for the avodim v'inoisim, for the work and the affliction that they afflicted the Yidden. Und das, was steht behemshach zu don anoichi, and this that it says, they'll come out to a great fortune. I'm going to judge that nation. So it seems like a judgment for the Egyptian is about zusammen mit dem Schar ha'avoda far die Eden, because together with the pay that for work for the Yidden is das euch gewinn an Inyan shel oynesh far di Mitzrim. It was also, there was also the idea of punishment for the Egyptian. By them it was taken away a great portion, a great fortune, bis as v'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim, to the extent that they cleaned out Egypt. So it was mainly reward for all the work that they did there, a payment for the reward. But also, there was also a punishment included in this for the Egyptian, that way they've been taken away from them and that they clean out Egypt. So what's the difference between this way or that way, whether it's the main thing for the Yidden to get the reward or it's the main thing to punish the Egyptian? It seems to be the end result is the same, but it makes a difference how it gets to the Yid. If it gets to the Yid in an open way in which the Egyptians give it to them, or the Yidden take it on their own. Both. The chiluk zwischen the zwei Efanim is the difference between these two ways. Leuten ersten Eufen, according to the first way, in which it's mainly a punishment for the Egyptian, is kein nafke minen nit in was faran Eufen der Rechush Godel kommt zu Yidden. It doesn't make a difference in what way this great fortune reaches the Yid. As long as the Egyptians are punished, it's taken away from them. So, and the Yid just gets it because it has to go, so it goes to the Yid, so it doesn't make a difference how they get it. The Zach is, the point over here is, as der Rechush Godel soll zugenommen werden von Mitzrim. We need that this great fortune should be taken away from the Egyptians. Und das, was es kommt zu Eden, and the fact that it comes to the Eden, is blois an inyan study. This is only a side matter. It's not the important. The important is to take it away. Is meinaf kemina de Eufen bazeh. So what difference does it make how it reaches the Yid? As long as it's taken away from the Egyptian, that is the main point, according to the first way, what needs to happen here. And therefore, when the Eden wollten them Rechush Godel zugenommen von the Mitzrayim b'shas makas choshech, if the Eden would have taken this great fortune from the Egyptians during the plague of darkness, ledugma, for example, they would take it then. So the intent, they will go out with a great fortune would have been accomplished. It would taken away from the Egyptian. However, but if when the pasuk says they will go out with a great fortune, is be'iker schar aveda, it's mainly the pay for a work, fardem vavodim vino eso, because they enslaved them, afflicted them. Muz as doch sein beifashal tashlum, it has to be in a way of payment. That's the payment. Darf dabei sein golui v'nirgash, so that it has to be open, and you have to feel as the Mitzrim giving us the Eden, that it's the Egyptians that giving it to the Jews. Das haste, which means Batsolun der Mid of Schar HaAvodah, that this is the way they're paying for the work. So you have to have the Egyptian feel and know it's not enough to take it away from them. It has to come as a payment that they're paying them openly for the work. Und das ist, was der Medrash sagt. So this is what the Medrash is saying us. As davke der mit, was der Eibishter hat gesagt, that specifically the fact that the Eibishter said, V'nosati es chen oma ze goymer, I will give the grace of the people, and they will borrow vert bavorund. This forewarns, makes sure that there won't be an opening of a mouth to Avram to say, that he fulfilled, they will slave, work them, and afflict them. He fulfilled, and he did not fulfill, they will go out with a great fortune. What does it mean? The etzem haftoche von dem Eberstun v'achri yetzu b'chush godli, just the promise that they will go out with a fortune in any way possible, in welches is nicht ausgeteilt geworden befeirisch mekuven, in which it's not really translating how they're gonna go out b'chush godli. But just achri yetzu b'chush godli that Hashem promised Abraham, we don't know exactly from there how it's going to happen. We just know that it's going to be Yetzibur Chush Godel. And it's possible, can ausgeführt werden, that can also be accomplished. Euch wenn das is in an Eufen, also when it's in a way, as in them is nicker hauptsächlich dem Tzadaynish von dem Mitzrim, in which you can mainly see, recognize the part that it's a punishment for the Egyptian. Unit that sad haschar v'atagmul, and not that part that it's a reward and a pay, compensation for the avodah v'inu for the Eden, for the work and the affliction of the Eden. Doesn't matter because they have the rechush gadol. We don't know. So either way, we can fulfill the Achrechetz Baruch Gadol, whether you can tell that it's at pay or not. But if the pay is done in a way of where you don't see that it's a reward, it mainly looks like a penalty for the Egyptian. Demolt, there is a Pischem Peh, but Demolt bleibt an Ort for a Pischem Peh la Avram Avinu. Avram, our father, he still has an opening of a mouth. He has a complaint. Avraham, der Av von Am Yisrael, the father of the Jewish nation, want, he is demanding as der Mekuvon von dem Rechush Godel soll sein be'iker l'toivas Yisrael, that the intent of this great fortune should be mainly to benefit the Yidden. That should be the goal. Das is an inyan from schar farm va'avodum. This is an idea of reward for working them. Und davke demult is das farzea tanchumim, and it's only then that this becomes a comforting von Golus Hamar in Mitzrayim, on the bitter Golus of Mitzrayim, is to have the paid Rechush Godel come in a format that it shows compensation for their work. And with this idea, the mit is moving favos the Pischein Peh von Avram. Now we understand why Avram's complaint is tied as that he afterwards he did not fulfill with them. This is tied to the beginning that he did fulfill Vavodim V'inu. Is verbunden mit der Hakdama, that it's tied to the introduction from Vavodim V'inu Oisom Kiyumem, that he did fulfill, that they will work them, and therefore he wants it to be a reward. But may understand, because this is inherently what the taina is. The taina is, since the work, they did the work, it's they that they should be compensated, should be bohem. But this is their yisoid von Pischen Peh. This is the basis for the opening of the mouth. That's the basis of Avram's complaint. Benegay them rechush godel, as it relates to this great fortune. V'bal v'avodim v'inu oisoim kiyam bohem. Since afflicting them, afflicting them, he fulfilled by them the Eden. The Eden haben durchgemacht die Avodah Kosher V'inu. It's the Jews that went through the difficult work, labor, and affliction and abuse. Is das mechayiv? So then this obligates as euch the achri keyesh berechush godel, that also when later on they go out a great fortune, zol zayin in an oifun fun, should be in a way kiyam bahem, that it should be fulfilled by them. Us the far is the toichus hadgosh, and that's why there's the extra emphasis kiyam bahem, nit kiyam stam, not just fulfilled, but fulfilled in them. The Eden sollen fühlen wie der rechush godel. The Yidden should feel that this great fortune is melechatchila haftochet zuzei. They should feel this is a promise for them. It's not just to punish the Egyptians. They should feel that bohem is for them. Und zu libzei, and for because of al schar betagmul fazeir avodah v'inui, as a reward and a compensation for their work and affliction. So, so in order to give in to this argument of Pischem Peh of Avram, that's why the Eibishter forewarned and made sure, as the Rechush Gottels Onkum zu Eden, that this great fortune should reach the Jews in an Eifon in such a way as the Mitzrim sollen as geben mitchein, that the Mitzrim should give it, and they should give it with grace, b'ritzoinam hatoif, with their goodwill, u'besever panim yafis, and with a good countenance. The pasuk says, "V'nosati is chena I will give the grace of the people, so they will want to give them." But this is madgish, this emphasized as the rechush godel, that this great fortune is verbunden mit Vavodum V'inu Oisum Kenal. It's tied to serving and afflicting them, as I said before. And therefore, that's why they're giving it. Because they're doing it on their own. They're giving it as compensation. So that is what the Pasuk V'nosati Eschein Ha'om by us in Shemos adds to the ability, to the possibility that Eibishter can fulfill the promise to Avram in different ways. But the Eibishter adds, so the Medrash says, no, the Eibishter is not just going to give it to them, but he's going to give it that they're going to willingly, to show Avram Avinu complains that they need to be given in a way of a pay, not just to punish the Egyptian. They didn't deserve this because of the compensation. So the Eibishter said, and the Rebbe explains, the Gemara goes a step further, that even this is not yet fully, and Parsha Shemos does not yet fully bring out that point. We need what the Pasuk says in Parshas Boyas, the Gemara will say, that over there the Eibishter says, Daber no, that not only should they give you, but you should go ahead and ask for it. You have to ask for the pay, which would more emphasize there is pay here, Zion. Of them is the Gemara Meisif. The Gemara adds to that in the Bavoranish von Tainus Avram, in the uh, answering Avram's argument, durch bringen dem Inyan Hanal, by bringing down this idea, the kesher mit dem Posik, as it ties to the Posik, daber no be'oznei ha'om v'yishalu geimer. The Posik in Parshas Boy. Afilu wenn die Mitzrim geben die Iden beim Arizgen von Mitzrayim klei chesed v'klei zov. Even if the Mitzrim give the Jews, when they leave Mitzrayim, they give them the silver and golden vessels, ubesever ponim yofes, and with a good countenance, ken noch alt sein an Ort zu sagen, you can still, there's still room to argue, to say, as is in them nit kentig von golui, that over there you can't tell openly vidos computer schar avoida, that this is coming as pay for the work. As ken sein as svora, there might be an idea, this is nit schar avoida, that's not the pay for work. Nor stam nisinas matonis, maybe it's just giving gifts. Other kidei, maybe it's just gift. Other kidei as Eden's only taris game in Mitzrayim, or maybe so that the Yid should not leave Egypt be'edim of a chayser koil in naked without anything. So they're giving them something, but it doesn't show yet that it's actually paid. Und der Riber, and therefore kidei zu bevornen in ganzen dem Inyan, in order to fully forewarn, make sure this idea from V'achrechen Yitzu B'Rechush Godel, Kiyem Bohem, that he fulfilled in them going out with the great fortune. As Manzovis and Klora does that this should be very known clearly that this is pay for work. Or the Eibishter ongizok, so the Eibishter therefore instructed, as the Oivdim, those who worked, U'b'oifun de V'inu, and those who worked, not just work, they afflicted them, they abused them. They themselves zolm betten. They should ask, and they're asking, and they will accomplish. They'll give them monen. They need to demand by the mitzvah them rechush gadol, this great fortune. But does bavais begolui, that shows openly as the rechush kumtze. It's earned by them. It owes it, and they're owed it by demanding it. V'yishalu. So based on these steps of the Medrash and the Gemara, we'll understand the shinuyim, the changes in Loshen HaGemara, legabe Loshen HaMedrash, in the language of the Gemara, relative to the language of the Medrash. In the Gemara, it just says you shouldn't say unit the Loshen Pischem Peh, Oisei Tzadik. It says that Tzadik unit Avram Avinu. It doesn't say Avram Avinu. Wenn sie wollt gewähnt beäufen, as die Mitzrim sollen allein geben dem Rechush Godel zu ihnen. If it wasn't Yishalu, but it would be in a way that the Egyptians give alone, as it says in Parshas Shemos, that they give the Rechush Godel zu ihnen. Wollt es euch gewähnt a Heichoche, that would still be a proof as the Rechush Godel, that this great fortune gehört zu ihnen, that it belongs to the Eden. And as their mekuvan in them is to have a Yisrael, that would be sufficient to tell us that it belongs to a Yid and that the intent is the benefit of the Yid. B'meile is netokim pischein peh. So there can't really be an opening of a mouth, which means alidei achar hapeseach peh hapeh sosu, which means somebody, pischain peh, which means somebody causes you to open your mouth, which means because of something that happened, uh, this gives you a saying, which means the fact when they call the Mitzrim, Ebze Gibon is eine Goyim zu sagen. So that means the Egyptians, if they're not uh, uh, giving, so they will cause that Yetsu B'Rechush Godel Loikiyam Behem. That there's an argument that simple argument that he did not fulfill by them. You can't say because he did fulfill them. They won't be able to make a mouth opening, giving an opportunity to say that he didn't fulfill because they did give it on their own and they gave it to them. And therefore, we know that it belongs to the Yid, so there is no opening. On a higher level, however, as is nor shlo yomer tzaddik, that in a way of a tzaddik, tzad shleimus hatzedek v'hayosher from Avram Avinu, because of the wholesomeness and the completeness of the justice and fairness of Avram Avinu, is do an orzuzogen. So then you can say, it's not a pischem peh, not giving you an opportunity to say, but you can say, as a tzaddik, you can say, as durch machendik azak koishi hashibud, that when you went through, had to bear such a difficult enslavement, v'inui, and affliction in Mitzrayim, v'avodum v'inu, the servitude and the affliction. Kum di in zu werden bezahlt mit der Rechush Godel. The Jews deserved to be paid with this great fortune in an Eufen, so that it should be openly revealed as that is really the pay for their work. Was dafke demelt only then when you can openly see that this is pay is Godel. They go out Godel ki and bohem, that it was fulfilled by them, that they're getting it as pay. Bishleimus, that is when it's complete. Und das wird aufgetan genau, and this is accomplished, as we said before, durch them was daber no bosneom v'yishalu goimer, that speak to the people, let them borrow when they're asking for it, that you can see that it's reward. So basically, the Rebbe says that the Gemara adds a higher level of justice for the Yidden, not just that we can tell the fact that they're giving it to them and the Yidden are not taking it. We already can tell, and Avram Avinu cannot have an opening of not cause him to say, because it's clearly that the Egyptians are giving them as pay. That main thing is the pay for the Yidden, and that's, but still can still say Avram Oisei Tzaddik from the level of righteousness, that having gone through such difficulties, they should be openly, even more than that, they should yishalu. If they demand it and they ask for it, then it's very clear that this is a pay. So this, the Rebbe explained the inyonim on the revealed level. The Rebbe is going to explain now in the spiritual Naveda Ruchnis. In Ruchnis and Yonim, we also have the idea of taking out the sparks of Egypt, and the question becomes, what is the main? Is the taking it out of Egypt or the elevation that you get? Let's look inside in Meir, in Prezeh B'Aveda Ruchni, is explaining this in the spiritual service of man. It says, Yedua, it is known as the Rechush Godel Vasidna Marish Genume from Mitzrayim, that the great fortune that the Yidden took out of Egypt, Bashteit B'Pnimius Inyonim, that consists in the inner matters of things. What did they take out? von den Nitzutze Kedushes, welche seinen gewähnt dort, also the holy sparks that were in Mitzrayim, they took him out. Koilel in them Kesef v'Chulu, including also includes the silver and the gold, the holy sparks in them Chulu. Mehad der noch gemacht davon der Mishkan. Then later on they used that silver and gold to make the Mishkan. Ubechlal genutzt b'kedusha, generally used for holy purposes, in holiness. Welche seinen Nisbarer geworden durch den Golch Mitzrayim, they have been sorted out through the exile in Egypt, so that they can later on utilize this for Kedusha. The Kavone und Tachlis von sehr durchmachendem Golus Mitzrayim, so the intent and the goal, the purpose of going through, bearing through this exile of Egypt is given was bichdei soll sich durch dem ausführen. So what took place, so through this should be accomplished that inyan v'achrich and yetzu berchush gadol. That later on they would go out with a great fortune, which means the Golus Mitzrayim was a reisnemen u'mayla zayin the nitzutze kedusha from Mitzrayim, to take out and to elevate the sparks of holiness from Egypt. That is the spiritual, the inner meaning of going out with Rechush Gadol, is all the sparks, the holy sparks that were there to elevate them. Was the midwert verantwortet mir? This answers a surprise. Now that we're talking about holy sparks that are being taken out, we understand. Otherwise, surprising. Why would the Eibishter not take them out before and give them this rechush? They wanted to go out. Since the Yidden were ready to forego the great fortune. They said, hopefully, we wish we can go out by ourselves. Uvi the Moshul was the Gemara brings, and as the example that the Gemara brings is Farvoso der Eberster nit mevater given of them. So how come Hashem did not forego? The Yidden were asking, why didn't Hashem forego? But based on the above that we're talking about the holy sparks, that was the whole purpose of going down, to bring out the holy sparks. Now. But based on the above, it says move on Posh, it's understood, and it's very simple. That Rechush Gadol is given an Iker Tzvek from Golus Mitzrayim. This great fortune was a main purpose of the exile of Egypt. That was the goal, as the Rechush Gadol werd nit oisgif on them Rechush Gadol, without this great fortune werd nit oisgif the Kavone. So you're not going to accomplish the intent und Tachlis of Golus Mitzrayim, and the goal of the exile of Egypt. Durch dem Vavodim through the fact that so this explains why that had to be. We needed for them to take out the spark. They needed the Rechush Gadol. They needed to elevate. That was the goal. That was the purpose. And through this, durch them was the Yidden haben b'avidosum mevarer u'mayligmen. Through this, that the Yidden in their work, they sorted out and they elevated the nitzutze kedusha shebemitzrayim, the holy sparks, the sparks that were in Mitzrayim. Hat sich aufgetan, this also accomplished euch an aliyah bohem, in them. In the Yidden Atzmam, the Yidden themselves were elevated. So they elevated the sparks that they took out of Mitzrayim, and this brought about an elevation in the Yidden themselves. But this is their Pirush HaPnimi. This is the inner meaning in them was mezogt v'achrichen yetzu b'rechush gadol. They will go out with this great fortune, which means it's an accomplishment for the Yidden, for the yetzu, as the Yidden haben bakumen und seinen arois, that the Yidden received, and they went out mit rechush gadol, with this great fortune. Und die Aliyah was hat sich aufgetan in Eden. And this is the elevation that was accomplished by the Yidden, that I will also bring you up. meaning that there was an aliyah in the Yidden. They took out the sparks and an elevation by Yidden. So now the question becomes the two aspects. What was the main thing? Was the main thing the benefit of the Yidden, that they were Nis'ala, the Ilui, or it was to take out the sparks, test, their meat? Wird man verstehen, the Teuchen von den zwei Inyonim hanau will understand the contents of these two matters that mentioned earlier in Sif Hey, but by the Ruchnis in the spiritual service. Eib men nimmt on as the Rechush Godlis Ikre gewender auf to Benegeya Mitzrayim. If we're going to say, we're going to accept that the main fortune is mainly to accomplish as it relates to Egypt, to minish sein the Mitzrim, to punish the Egyptians. It comes out as the Iker Hamakuva Pnimi, that what is the inner intent, the main intent from Golus Mitzrayim, is bichdei zu mevarer sein aroistam von dort in Nitzoitzes HaKedusha, is to sort out and take out of there the holy sparks. Zei zolon is baraven, so they should be sorted out. That's the main. Nor hayois as Eden seine gewen. But since the Yidden were the ones, die welche haben bei Vedosum ausgeführte Kavona, through their Aveda, they accomplished this intent. Kommt sie der Faraschar, so they deserve a reward. But das ist der Ali Gedoyla. This is the great elevation, zu welcher sie kommen durch their Aveda, which they come through their service. That's one way. However, Avram Avinu, however, cooked of them Rechush Godel. His look on this great fortune where is Beiker Negeo Eden, as it's mainly connected to Eden. That they will go the great fortune he observes by them, by the Eden. As their Mekuvan from Golus Mitzrayim is the intent of the exile of Mitzrayim is Kidei Eden zone the Grechen Zeir Aliyah Vishlemus. It's in order for the Eden to reach their elevation, their wholesomeness. Und der Pharao said the Eberster Arab geschickt in Mitzrayim, and that's why Hashem sent them to Egypt to mevarer sein dort die Nitzutze Kedusha, to sort out there the sparks of Kedusha, bichdei durch them to the Grechen Zeir Shlemus, so through this them to reach their wholesomeness. Das heißt, this means that Mekuvon is the Te'eles Valiyah von Eden. From Avram Avinu's perspective, he says the main thing is the benefit and the elevation of Yid. Nor dos werder greich. But how does the Yid's benefit come? Durch Birur HaNetzutz, is by sorting out the sparks. High time darf der Rechush Godel kommen dafke, and for that reason this great fortune needs to come specifically durch the v'nosati es chein ha'om that I will give the grace of the people, as the Medrash says in our Pasuk in Shemos, they should loan them and they should go full. When the Mitzrim gibun zeyer rechush zu Eden, that it's the Mitzrim to give their fortune to the Eden. Need the Eden nemen dos alain. It's not that they're taking it by themselves. So the fact that they give wird gebracht, that expresses, it brings out the idea as the bitter hanitzutzis. Hanitzutzis is to leave the aliyah from Eden, that the sorting out of the spark is for the elevation of Eden. They're giving it to Eden. Was the far seinen die nitzutze kedusha atzma mesayeh the Eden ba'avidosum. That's why these sparks of kedusha support the Eden and their avodah. So it's for they're helping them in their avodah, and they're giving them these nitzutze kedusha have been given to them. So, which means that it's not just that the Yidden get the elevation, but those elevation comes through the sparks, and the sparks are given to them. So that is the main aspect of the elevation of the Yid. In the minyan, similar as it's known in the idea, Hashem is with my helpers. What does it mean? Hashem has other helpers over there that help a Yid, and Hashem is amongst them. What are the Ozrei? So it's explained in the Maimorim as the Nitzoitzis Hagdusha, that those holy sparks, that they are sorted out through the void of the Yidden, they become helpers. They become support. They support the person who does his service. Those sparks that he sorted out, they help him. Yes, Loimar, those was the Nitzutze Gedusha. You can say that this fact that these sparks of Gedusha, während enough the Ezrim become later on the helpers from them mevarer, from the person who sorted them out. They help him out. That is a mesuba v'titzah. That is a consequence. It's a result. Der Fund was der Iker mekuvan von dem Bitter Hanitzoitzes, because the main intent from sorting out the Nitzoitzes Bishvil Yisrael is for the Yidden. The Yidden's only Salaven. So they should be elevated. Since that's the main purpose, so they become that fulfillment of the goal to help the Yidden Ba'Israel, to help him and to see to it that he can accomplish and get his elevation. And that's why the Tzutze Kedusha themselves help the Yid to get his elevation. So it's not mainly for the Nitzutzis to be taken out, but it's for the Nitzutzis to taken out through the Yid, so the Yid gets his elevation. These Nitzutzis help the Yid. And the Rebbe says now that the same thing is, this is by Mitzrayim, but the same thing is by the Avodah of every Yid. We also have these two ideas. Zwei Fanim Anal sein euch voran in der Avodah für jeder Yid. These two ways that we're talking about also exist in the service of every Yid. Was Yeridas HaNeshama Lamata Bechinas Golus Mamish, going the Neshama to descend below, is actually a level of Golus, quoting from the Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin. And we're talking about by Golus, just like the physical Golus is Mitzrayim, the Golus Mitzrayim, and the Pasuk was for B'yetzu B'rechush Gadol. The same thing is the neshama goes down in this Golus of the body for Rechush Gadol. The Yeridas HaNeshama Lamata, the descent of the neshama below is to mevarer sein dem Guf v'nefesh habahamis v'chelke ba'el, is to sort out the body and the animal soul and its portion of the world. Lekashram u'liyachdam ba'orin sof baruch hu, sorts out the body and the shabamis to hide them and to unite them in the infinite, in the light of the Ein Sof, blessed be He. Was durch dem macht men adire lo yizborech b'tachtenim. That way you make for Hashem, blessed, a dwelling place here in this low world. So you take the guf and the nefesh habahamis, or the part of the world, you bring it close, you tie it, you unite it with Hashem, and that brings Hashem down in this world. Durch dem was the neshama kumt herab lamata. And then through this, that the neshama descends below, fir durch the aveda from bitter v'zichach ha'olam, and accomplishes this service of sorting and refining the world, is yiridat zu tzorech aliyah. That descent is for the purpose of an elevation. Vert in ir aufgetan an aliyah. So there is an elevation in the soul. Nochecher is given koidim yiridas lamato, before becomes even higher than the soul was before it came down below. Through the avodah that it works with the guf and nefesh habahamis and the chelke ba'olam to be makasherit, there's an aliyah in the neshama. Bizas durch them der gleicht sie zu ihr Shlemus, to the extent that through this the neshama, the nefesh elokis, reaches its wholesomeness. Und in dem sein voran zwei svares. And here we have the two ideas. Al derech hanal b'negei to Golus Mitzrayim, similar to what we talk about Golus Mitzrayim. This is the Golus of the neshama in the human being. Aleph. As the Iker v'tachlis, that the main and the goal is as Welt sollen is werden, that the world should be sorted out. Und wer nadir Yisbarach should become a dwelling place for him, blessed. Nor hazovi Yidden seinen divas tun of the dira, since the Yidden are the ones that are accomplished and make the dwelling place for Hashem, kum tzeda farasar, they deserve therefore a reward. V'achrechen yetzu berchush godel. Later on, they go to a great fortune. That is the elevation to which they reach through this Avaita, because they worked and they made the Dira B'tachtoinim, so they deserve the elevation. That's how come they get elevation. That's one way. Based on the other way, the Tachlis HaKavon is in. The ultimate goal is in. As Ayid soll der Grechen zu sein Emeser Shleimus, that Ayid should reach his true wholesomeness. Nor der Weg dazu is, but what's the pathway? How could he reach his wholesomeness? Is durch Yeridas HaNeshama Lamato and Yiraveda Bebir V'zicha Choyla, by the Neshama descending below, and its work in sorting out and refining the world. That's the way its elevation can come. So which one of the two is the main? And the Rebbe is going to explain in Osid Aleph that it depends on the way the person approaches his shlichus, and that he's going to do the work in this world. Yudalef, die zwei Efanim anal seine verbunden mit zwei Efanim, wer Neshama geht zu ihrer Aveda von Bira V'zicha Choylo. These two ways are tied to the two ways how the Neshama approaches its service from sorting out and refining the world. Number one, Aleph. The Avodah Bebirur Ha'olam is mit Kabbalah Soil. That your work in sorting the world becomes with accepting the yoke. V'anevet Poshet. You approach it as a simple slave. This says, Asfarim is kenaf kamina nidvos the Avodah Tutoy. For him, it makes no difference what his service accomplishes. His approach is Erveis nor ein Zach. He just knows one thing. Erot Ashlichus from the Meibrushun was darf ausführen. He has a mission of Hashem that he must accomplish. Says Baim aber nit meshane, but it makes no difference to him. Was the Shlichus tutoif. It doesn't make a difference what this mission, what it accomplishes. Ubeloshen hayidua, as the long-known saying, language used, Ilu nitztav lechtev eitzim, had he been commanded to chop wood, that would be what difference? The Eibishter told him that's just doing the service of Hashem. But that was gitom with the Zelber Kabbalah Soil, he would have done this with the same acceptance of yoke. That's one approach of just doing blindly whatever it is, just as a simple slave following whatever needs to be done. Base. The other way is even though he's doing his service with subjugation, accepts the yoke, but he also knows, and he understands them, the meaning, the contents of this service. He understands the idea, the content, what is the accomplish, what is the shlichus do, as is verta dir lo yisbarich b'tachtonim, that he making a dwelling place for him, blessed in this lower world. He has an appreciation for what his work is accomplishing. What's the difference between these two approaches in service? Sagt sich, this expresses itself later on as it relates to the elevation of the soul, which is accomplished through this service. What happens, what elevation is to the soul, depending on his approach to the Avodah. Then Zain Avodah is in the Mersh Neif, when his service is in the first way. With the only goal, the kavanah and intent is to durchführen the Meibrushten Shlichus, just to accomplish Hashem's mission, the Shlichus. Then Damut is by him the Aliyah from the Shmosei. So then the elevation of his soul via inyan noisev to zayin avodah, then that becomes an additional matter to his service. It's like a reward, because that's not at all what he is he's set to do the shlichus, and the fact that something is an elevation, that's like a separate. That's an inshus schar. Was bakum der noch that he receives later on. Therefore, he gets it because was durchgeführt the kavone from the Eibishter, that because he accomplished the intent of the Eibishter, so he gets it as schar. But when he senses also the contents of the shlichus, that he also feels what he accomplishes with his service. That he ties the world with godliness, that there should be a dwelling place for him, blessed in the lower world. So then his elevation of his soul, then it's not like a reward that his neshama is elevated, nor via hemshech that becomes a continuation from the Avodah Gufa. That's part of the Avodah. Warum the Aliyah from the neshama is doch inyon das Gufa. Because the elevation, what is the elevation of the neshama? That's this itself as the Amshochas Atzmus was wird aufgetan durch ihre Aveda bebirur v'zichu cholam, that this extending Atzmus, bringing down Atzmus, which he accomplishes through his service in the sorting out and refinement of the world, the dirul Atzmusi Yisbarach, making a dira in the world, wird nisgalet to the neshama, that is revealed to the neshama, was hat aufgetan the dira, that has accomplished the dira. It also benefited, gets part, that's part of the Avodah. He has in mind that he's doing it to make a Dirila Yisbarach, and that Dirila Yisbarach, he also becomes a Dirila Yisbarach by bringing down the Atzmos in the world and in his own neshama. So, when, as the Rebbe explains here, though, if the Avodah is mitzad, just doing the work, then his elevation of the neshama is a schar. But if his avodah is in a way that he appreciates what he's doing as a dirila yisbarach, then his own elevation is a continuation of that avodah, because that's part of being mamshich. The atzmus is a dira in himself as well. But here too, Yud Beis, the Rebbe continues of euch der zweiter Eufen avodah can sein b'shtei ponim. But also the second way of service can be two ways. At what point does he sense that aliyah? Aleph. As der Teuchon und Öftu von seiner Avodah wird bei ihm der Herd. When does he sense the contents of the service? Nicht b'shas ha'avodah gufa, not at the time that he's doing the service, nor b'gemara ha'avodah. And when he finishes the service, b'shas it is mashlim ha'avodosei, when he completed his work, kumter lidei ha'koreh, then he recognizes afterwards that what he had accomplished through his work. Based, number two, as gufa, that even at the time when that he's doing his service, the herter dem teuchen von der avodah, he senses the contents and the intent of the service. Bis as tut avidosei, to the extent that he's doing his service nicht nor birdei zu durchführen the Kavanah von dem Eibishten, not just to fulfill the intent of Hashem. He's doing something to do what Hashem wants. No, those gufis kaviyochel, this is itself, so to speak. It becomes also his intent and feeling of the avodah. He is involved in it at the time of working. He senses, I'm making a dir b'tachtonim, bringing the Welt l'shlemusa, to bring the world into his completion during the avodah, either after the avodah or at the time of the avodah. He feels that. These two ways is der Teuchen Achilik, wie der Inyan Anal steht in Medrash, und wie steht in Gemara. The difference, the way it's in the Medrash and the Gemara. The Gemara, they are up to nemen the Afshoris from Yoimer Efer Tzadik, just to take away the possibility that Tzadik to say, that he hadn't fulfilled the Bohem in the Rechush Godel, haben die Jiden gedarft scheu sein von dem Mitzrayim. So the Jiden needed to bar from Mitzrayim. Is thus the far, that's the reason why Ledasa Gemara, because according to the opinion of the Gemara, haben die Jiden euch be'eis uvizman hashibut, that even in the time, at the period and during the time that they were enslaved, their heart, they sense as the tachlis ha'avodah is the rechush godel, that the ultimate goal of the avodah is the bitter hanitzoitzes. Und der Riber, monen does the Eden allein the Gemar ha'avodah, and therefore they themselves are demanding it when they finish the avodah, v'yishalu als hemshech to the avodah, as they continue to the avodah. Hayois as der hemshech from zeir avodah is to bakum dem rechush godel, because the follow-up from their service, the continuation is to get the rechush godel, because this is all about the rechush godel, even at the time when they're doing the avodah. As opposed to the medrash, is the mekuven v'tachlis hat sich nicht angehört in der avodah von Eden b'shas hashibut. They didn't, this purpose and the tachlis did not really felt in the service at the time of the shibut that were working to get the rechush godel. Nor lacher gemar v'ashlomas avodah, after they completed and finished the work. And the father is masbig, that's why it's sufficient that the rechush godel zol kumel achar gemar ha'avodah, that it should come after the completion avodah. You know, if vayashilum, as the Mitzrayim alone give that student canal, they give it themselves, and not that the Yidden demand. These are the two ways the Rebbe explains between the beginning, when he finishes the avodah, or during the avodah, is the Gemara and the Medrash. The Gemara is during the avodah itself, and therefore they have to yashilu. But according to the Medrash, afterwards it's enough. So that's why it's enough that when the Mitzrim give to them, Yud Gimel from Kol Anal Kum Tareiz Da'ira in their avodah for Yederit, all the above get the lesson for the service of every Yid b'may seinu v'avodah seinu kol zman meshech hagolus. In our actions and our service for the duration, all duration of Golus. Especially in our times in the hills of Mashiach. The Yid needs to study Torah and do and observe, fulfill the mitzvahs with accepting the yoke. This is what Hashem said, commanded. It makes no difference in the how forceful his service is at all. It makes no difference to him at all. What Hashem's intent is in his mission and his service, he doesn't care. So therefore, it makes no difference by him. Whether he's in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, or the Bisman HaGolus Tam, or maybe he's or in the time of general Golus, or there in Golus could be general Golus, or in the hills of Mashiach. The Oifen Hakiyum is miten kavana v'tachli. The way he does the mitzvahs is one intent, one goal. Ton atzivu shlichus from the Meibishn. He's to do a command and a mission of Hashem. This and the however, one realizes, knows that we find ourselves in the hills of Mashiach. And the ultimate wholesomeness of the days of Mashiach, and the resurrection of the dead, which would be the revelation of the infinite light, blessed be He, in this physical world. That why the world was originally created from us, quoting from the Tanya and Perek Lamed Vav. Totally b'maseinu v'avideseinu kozman meshech hagolus. That this hinges in our work and our service during the time of Golus, the duration of Golus. Darf dos gufa de herben in seiner Veda. Then that needs to be sensed in his work. That this is Ikus of the Mashiach, and this is the ultimate goal of everything that's going to take place. And we see, practically speaking, in actuality, when a Yid senses a sign kiyum ha-Torah mitzvahs, that his observance of Torah mitzvahs bringt on his magdim, and brings earlier, hastens achisheno, makes quicker bias HaMashiach, or being Beis HaMikdash chulu, the coming of Mashiach and the building of the Beis HaMikdash, etc. Das haste, which means a Zayin Aveda bringt the Welt, the whole Seder HaIshtaslus Tachlisei, that brings the world and the entire order of the Ishtaslus to its goal. So the Kachnivra mit Chilosa, for which it was created, as a Zolzaina Dira Loyis Borach B'Tachtoin, that it should be a dwelling place for him. So when he actually feels the goal and the purpose of bringing the world to its wholesomeness, is ein Avodas Hashem, the practical we see, then his service of Hashem, Gor miteinander chayes, for a totally different vitality and an energy, it's a passion, with a sach mer hider v'chudu, and with much more perfection. B'shaz the Avodah is boifim kazeh, and when he serves in such a way, is ein Wellen, then he's wanting and betting and asking, as is Zayin Gila Mashiach Beifenach Legamri, that it should be the Rav Leif Mashiach, is in a totally different way. Bis mont kaviyachol, until he demands, so to speak, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now. And this itself, dos gufa, is noch mer mamahir umagdim. This hastens and makes quicker the geula from kol echad v'achas mi Yisrael, the redemption of each man and woman of Israel, zusammen mit Shchinta, together with the divine, was gefinzach begoluso, which is also in Golus. Das wird der miyad heinegolin, it becomes immediately they're redeemed. Miyad mamish, now, immediately, actually, now, bagolo didan. This is Mesiches Shabbos Parshas Dvorim, Tavshin Mem.